So taking a look at the survey, and board members, you've got the actual slides in your middle folder if you want to look at it either on the, in front of you or on the screen. So, okay, so Fallon Research. Fallon is the company that we contracted with as a research firm. Oakwood Schools has used them in the past to provide a representative survey. There were 352 responses. This was either a phone or a text that community members received to fill out the survey or complete the survey. And then in addition to that, I was a little bit worried about people that may want to give responses and maybe didn't get a chance to get that lucky phone call or text. So we put similar questions onto our website. I use the word similar questions because in a statistical approach that Fallon Research uses, when they give, let's say, a list and ask people to give their number one reason why that they believe to be importance of what we should be tackling first, for example, and they give 6 suggestions, they're looking at your most. They want your number one reason, and that's it. On the online survey, we went ahead and set it so that they could click as many things as they wanted. So you won't be able to necessarily match up word, number for number the percentages because it may not match up that way. So they talked about that. I would probably also say that the Fallon research was they actually based on representative part of the community, so that they were trying to get similar demographics, age ranges, and things to mimic what the community is. The online survey was an open, non-representative group, and we had 88 responses for that. But again, both surveys will be shared. Here's the themes that I would share that are kind of overall. Oakwood residents love living here. Schools are the driver of why people move or move back to Oakwood, and residents are overwhelmingly satisfied with the quality of education being provided. Oakwood residents are eager for information. This gets into communication I'll share a little bit later. Few indicated that they were dissatisfied with the schools, and then some were unsure about key area priorities, indicating a need for more targeted communication, and I'll explain what that looks like a little bit. So these slides actually come from the Fallon survey, so we left them for integrity. Paul Fallon was able to come and talk with our administrative team a few weeks ago. Just due to his schedule, there's only one Paul Fallon, and he's already locked in going to other board meetings to do the presentations for the districts he contracted with on this board meeting night and the one in May. I was a little bit worried about having him wait until and come in June. So I asked him to come to our principals meeting, which worked well anyway, because it gave us a chance to look at the data and talk with him. And so some of these things you'll see are obviously based on the interpretation, the lens that he shared with us. So I know this is hard to read, so I'm going to go ahead and read it for you. Talks about the opinion research data that was gathered through a combination of the live telephones and the interviews, 352 adults that were 18 years or older and had valid residential void for the cellular telephones. The interview took place between February 12th and March 1st, and talked about a little bit of sampling bias or error that could take place within a 5% error, and again, from a statistical approach. They did talk about weighing the estimates based on demographics. They talked about opinion polls to increase that idea of error, such as other unintentional bias or wording or questions, and their hope was to remove as much of that as possible. And just the disclaimer that not all results may add up to exactly 100%. Some people may have opted not to answer a certain question. And they also decided, because it was a phone or a text survey, and they worry about fatigue, so the questions were asked in different order, person to person. Question number one wasn't question number one for the next person. The next one is the opinion environment. So this one talks about whether people were satisfied or dissatisfied with the quality of life in Oakwood schools. This is a general question about the Oakwood community, not Oakwood schools. They wanted a softball question, kind of warm people up. So first of all, are you satisfied living here? Here in general, you'll see 85% were strong. You'll see to the right talks about parents versus non-parents. You'll see it's slightly stronger for non-parents as far as satisfaction goes for that. And for comparison, just for comparison's sake, and I'll do this a couple times, for comparison, for timeline, I'm not going to go back and forth between the Fallon research results and the online results. I'll talk about them anecdotally. For this question, just to give comparison, the online survey had a 93% satisfaction to this question. So then the question goes into what was the biggest reason you moved to education or moved to Oakwood. People, number one, ranked in the quality of the schools. You'll see that the parents in that call-out box, 69% said the quality of the schools was their reasoning. 49% under the age of 65. So the schools is by far the number one factor that people decide to move into Oakwood schools. So turning to the question about satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the schools, they asked the question about this one. This is Oakwood schools, not with the Oakwood community. You'll see it's 62% there. That's dissatisfaction, 18%. Parents being 67%. And then you'll see to the right other demographics that are there. One word of caution, this was very important to me, was we was taking the 18% unsure to be negative. And I was kind of adding that into the negative category, and I appreciate that Paul Fallon said be careful of doing that. Unsure means unsure. So you almost have to take that out of, like, don't think of 62% out of 100. You almost have to take the 62% out of 82, sort of thing, if you probably think that way. They don't have an opinion for that. It could be that they don't have, and again, I was able to talk about non-parents in there too, talking about that 59%, and we don't have right there the idea about unsure. But again, data just says something there. We did ask him about, as he talks with other school districts and does this research, what does 62, how does that rank? And he said very high. That is very high for a school district to have satisfaction that way. So again, that context matters. The online survey had 80.7% satisfied. It appears that non-parents and possibly empty nesters aren't sure, or they're unsure and don't have an opinion either way. And the researchers showed that 62%, like I said, was strong. So then he asked the question about the idea of what does general satisfaction look like. You'll see that this is an open-ended question on Fallon. They let people respond, and you'll see that they categorized them in what way that they were able to group them in. And you'll see that the quality of education came out at number 1. And then child being happy or succeeding in school came out number 2, and so forth. The highest remarks talks about the great work of our staff. I do want to spotlight that. You'll see that a little bit later. We have amazing staff. I'm going to read a couple satisfaction quotes to share with you. This is what some of the respondents said. They said the commitment to high quality education, the quality of the teachers and the lower students to teacher ratio, the academic level in communication from teachers, and their constant communication, and everything is walkable. Teachers are accessible. The superintendent and principal stand in front of the school in the morning to talk to some parents and students. The next one talks about dissatisfaction. 18% said that it was, which was number 1, and this was misspending, finances, and taxes. Number 2 was the political, social matters in school. And then 3rd was poor leadership, administration, and teachers being 13%. One thing I want to caution is that end size. Remember I said that there were 352 respondents? The N in that bottom box says 52 people responded back that they were, 62 responded back that they were dissatisfied and gave a reason for it. So when we say 18%, it's not 18% of the 352, it's 18% of that 62, which is about 11 people, or 3% of that overall. So just being careful that, looking through some of those things, I had to kind of spend a little bit of time thinking about that as I was putting that into context. Still something that we should be aware of, still something we should monitor, but the context matters. Dissatisfaction, some of the open-ended responses included too much focus on inclusion and other issues instead of education, a lack of diversity, disrespectful comments from elementary students about people who are different, and the lack of appropriate intervention services, lack of support for students who are neurodivergent, the lack of opportunities for students with disabilities to shine to show. I'm only reading how it's written. To shine, show their strengths, to find out what they're good at, to feel included, to feel a valued part of the school, team, cohort, to receive praise from teachers. So now we talk about the rating of the school. You'll see that, first of all, that it ranks it in 3 ways. There's among all, among the parents, and among the non-parents. This question talks about the top priority. What should be the top priority? So again, here's an example of they were actually, the Fallon research was looking for the number 1 out of those choices that you see. The online survey said you could click more than 1. In this situation, the quality of education is something that should be top priority for us, and it seems pretty consistent across the board, 34%, 33%, 35%. Interestingly, same thing happened roughly with number 2 and 3 in that respect of student mental health and well-being being a priority, and then district finances. I do want to point out that, I talked about that. My notes are good. I'm tracking right. All right, overall, how would you rate the quality of education being provided by the Oakwood schools? You'll see that they gave it an excellent good 80% on the quality of schools. You'll see that it's high amongst the parents on the right, the subgroup, and then 79% is pretty close. So they're pretty similar. Again, they talked about that this is found, for context, said this is very high compared to other districts that, when they work with them. The next question talks about diversity, equity, inclusion. I kind of talk about this like Goldilocks. Is it too much, too little, or just right sort of thing? And you'll see the percentages in that circle of the question being, is what we're doing in the school district too little, too much, or just right when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion? The online survey said that that too much was 20.5%, 20.5. The right amount was 26%, and then the too little was 35.2%, and the unsure was 18.2%. So again, in that situation, the highest percentage was the too little, and then the just right, the right amount being 26.1. So mimics the same, I guess, hierarchy of this one is on number 1 being too little. 49% of the non-parents are unsure about this work. This could be about the lead to confusion and misunderstandings. That's something that we probably have to clarify when we think about communications. That's a significant number, and 40%, for example, are unsure. Could be that they're unsure because they're just not attuned to the work that's happening right there. And again, we'll have to lean into that as far as how we communicate and what do we communicate to our community. Next one talks about how we rate the jobs have done to prepare students for the future after they graduate. You'll see that 68% is in the excellent or good category. When you take a look to the right, you'll notice that the percentage increases with the age groups. So the parents currently say 63% are in that excellent good, but you'll see at the 65% or older, given a much higher reading at 77%. The next one that talks about the idea about the district managing its budget or finances. 41% have the excellent or good. The online survey, for context, has 59.5%. So I think that that's also pretty strong. You'll see the 65 and older age group have it much higher, also at 54%. Again, it's worth noting that the 28% unsure does not imply negative. It means that we probably need to do a better job of communications. So speaking of communications, this question asks just how do they currently get information or how much they're looking at information following the school district. Somewhat closely being 52%, and then very closely at 30%, not closely at 15%, and then 3% for the unsure. This is a double-edged sword because sometimes no news is good news, and they're not following it because they're don't feel that it's important. It could just be that they believe and trust in the schools. And so, again, sometimes good surveys lead to good questions, and you want to probe a little bit farther into that. Amanda has talked about just the idea about we go into kind of things with like focus groups when we think about the idea about community relations and community engagement. On this question about how you get your information, the number 1, but not far behind, but number 1 being reading the Oakwood Register newspaper. We had to explain to Fallon this comes out once a week, but talked about the importance then of making sure that we are connected with them and doing that. You'll see that the higher marker goes from among all at 27%. The parents is 3%, the non-parents is 40%. So one of the data points that I found was interesting was 60% of our community are empty nesters. And so being able to use the Oakwood Register, they're not going to go to that blog that I submit. So we'll have to take a look at other ways to communicate and engage them. But also the emails, school emails and newsletters play an important role. Next one talks about the Oakwood Register and their thoughts about it as far as how often that they read or access it. 57% is there, but again, 65 and older group had a 74% part that comes along with that. How would you rate the job that the school does in communicating with parents and community? 54% for this overall, and then the parents were 60%, and then you'll see that the frequent Oakwood Register newspaper readers were also at 60%. On the idea of facilities, just to bring it to your attention, as far as top priorities, this goes along kind of as we think about our master plan for phase 2, addressing Smith and Harmon. So again, we're feeling that there's a priority that goes along with that. Matt Cummins Stadium also looks at that. I'll be honest, we're taking a look at Matt Cummins Stadium, not necessarily from an aspect of turf. I'm not talking about turf. I'm not talking about doing anything with that. We're just talking about things about the safety aspects that come along with that for our students and our visitors. And so we'll be taking a look at those and be thinking about that for our future. Taking a look at the school buildings and security measures. Now, I want to make sure that we didn't define what security looks like. It's interesting that sometimes we could talk about the actual physical structure of it. We could also talk about our processes and practices. This isn't always money related. Sometimes it's just making sure that we've got good practices that come into play. So we'll have to dig into this one more. We got excellent and good being 48%, and then the subgroups being 62% for parents and 41% for non-parents. We talk about the idea about where do you get your information from? Number one in this situation are our classroom teachers. Our classroom teachers, my guess is obviously, our community knows that they bring a high quality of instruction. They're also our trusted source. And so making sure, I would say, that the takeaway for me is making sure our teachers have clarity on our priorities and our work. And if we do, then we're going to be able to extrapolate that out into the community properly. And you'll see other parents and district superintendent, recent graduates fall after that. From a conclusion standpoint, our key findings, I think I just want to kind of talk, and I've said this before, high satisfaction of the education and our staff. I want to make sure that if anything else gets spotlighted because our staff work very hard. The second one is that we received very high sentiments that were consistent among our spectrum of various subgroups. And the third one is a need for continuing inspection on our communication regarding facility plans, our EDI or our DI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and then our finance, which we'll continue to do. Our think abouts, we're going to think about for the future the idea about how we can continue to think about the satisfaction and share the good news stories of what's happening in our schools. I think tonight is a great example of our destination imagination, making sure that community members and residents know that. The other part is transforming uncertainty into support. So taking a look really at that unsure percentage and figuring out ways to engage with. So engaging with maybe empty nesters, maybe some young families that their kids haven't started school yet, and talking about some of those different areas. And then the idea about financial trust and through transparency. We'll continue to look at that and think about ways that we can do that. We're continuing to do that already with how we communicate on regular Oakwood scene information. Our website stays vibrant. We're going to continue to kind of look at that, but we want to make sure that our community knows that we're trying to be forthcoming. And then the last one is just expand avenues for community dialogue. This is a picture of a community coffee that we recently had, and we'll continue to have one each month throughout the rest of this school year. I guess this month and next month. And then the idea about maintaining brain consistency, that we want to build trust, we want to reflect our professionalism, and we want to provide that community trust that comes along with it. So with that, like I said, it'll take you, I'm sure, time to process. Really, here's what I really look at this. What was my goal or my end game? This is a baseline. This is a baseline. We're not coming up before a levy. We're not coming for a facility. We're not coming up before something else. And so my hope or my goal is that if we do this every 2 or 3 years, we'll be able to look back at this and start looking at some comparison. And hopefully if the numbers should look like they're getting better in a positive way. And if not, we'll lean into it and we'll be able to say there's something there right there because now it's the same community. 3 years have passed. Numbers went down in a certain area. Let's take a look into it. So that's kind of what the hope was. So thank you.
Dr. Gupta, if the board may have some questions, appreciate your presentation to the board. I have a question for you, and as you went through and looked at that data, did you have 1 or 2 data points that really jumped out at you, and what was your response to that?
Sure, I think for me it was that percentage on the diversity, equity, inclusion, and I know that gets mixed results, and I think how we communicate and make sure our students feel safe, seen, heard, and valued will obviously hit at different places, and so we'll never necessarily, I think, come to a mutual understanding or agreement. I'm not sure if we will. That might be my hope. But I just know that we're able to be in a place that hopefully we can share our story and then clarify the things that we're doing, so, because maybe some of it may be a mystique and maybe a misconception of what might be, what that actually feels like or looks like. And I think our goal then would be able to share what those things are, and hopefully the community can rally around that.
Any other thoughts or questions from the board?